Back to the daily grind, and shout out to the full-time patrons. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
Alright, full-time family, let's break down the UFC Moncton main card and our predictions. We just broke down, of course, the Fight Pass and the Fox Sports prelims. You can find those over there at patreon.com/fulltimemma, of course, and it's free. Just check it out a few days from now, and you can check out all of the full fight card predictions for free. Link is in the description. With that being said, let's break down the main card for UFC Moncton. Volkan Oezdemir versus Anthony Smith. We got No Time versus Lionheart. This is going to be a great main event. But let's start with the first fight of the main card, and that's going down between Alex Garcia and McGee. And this is a close fight, full-time family. Really hard one for me to call, but McGee, he almost fought to a draw with Sean Strickland in his last fight. Before that, he lost a close fight to Ben Saunders. McGee, he's a grinder with great cardio, and he's also well-rounded. But he has a tough matchup in Alex Garcia, who's 1-1 in his last two fights, coming off a loss to Ryan LaFleur after submitting the Kung Fu master Muslim Salikov. This fight is almost a toss-up for me because Alex Garcia trains with TriStar, fights out of Canada. He's dangerous everywhere, and he's been more successful in his last 4 fights than McGee. But McGee has better cardio. Also, he's a grinder, and he can, in my opinion, if this fight goes to the 3rd round, that's McGee's round for sure, because he's got the better cardio. We've seen Alex Garcia slow down in fights. So with that being said, we've seen McGee stick it out, win the 3rd round, you know, with his grinded out style. And so if Alex Garcia doesn't knock out McGee or win the first 2 rounds, I could see McGee very well winning this fight. But I'm going to give the edge to Alex Garcia. He's also going to be fighting out of TriStar, you know, so maybe have the home crowd on his side since he's fighting out of Canada. But either way, that doesn't really affect the fight too much here. Maybe in a 50-50 position, it'll help him out or on the judges' scorecards a little bit. But I could see this fight going either way still, but I'm going to give the edge to Alex Garcia. Moving on, we got John Volante taking on Ed Herman. Ed Herman's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, coming off of a unanimous decision loss to CB Dalloway a little over a year ago, and before that was knocked out in the 2nd round after knocking out Tim Boetsch back in 2016. John Volante has been more active lately, but he's also 1-3 in his last 4 fights, and he's coming off of a split decision loss to Sam Alvey. But before that, he actually beat Francis Barroso in a split decision. John Volante has fought to a split decision in each of his last 3 fights, losing 2 of those, and before that he was actually knocked out by Shogun Rua. So with all that being said, I'm going to be picking John Volante to win this fight. I'm not super confident in the pick because Volante hasn't been super impressive in his last 4 fights, but I think the year layoff will affect the 38-year-old Ed Herman, who's been knocked out in 2 of his last 4 fights. John Volante does not have the greatest cardio, but he can win a decision, or he can knock out Herman in this fight. So I think he's got, you know, maybe more path to victory here. But I'm not super confident in the pick, but I will give the edge to John Volante. Moving on, we got Andre Cirkunov returning after that fight with Sean O'Malley, taking on Jonathan Martinez, who's taking this fight on short notice after Andre Cirkunov's original opponent, Gavin Tucker, was forced out of this fight with an injury. Andre Cirkunov coming off of a pretty embarrassing loss to Sean O'Malley that he got a lot of heat for after he took Sean O'Malley down in the 3rd round, and Sean O'Malley was injured and he could barely walk, which allowed him to make it to a decision victory. And a lot of people, you know, criticized Cirkunov's fight IQ after that. But, you know, with that being said, he had been rocked in that fight, so you never know what's going through somebody's head when they make their decisions in the middle of a fight. And Cirkunov, I believe, is going to be looking to bounce back strong. He's now 12-6 as a pro. He's lost 2 split decisions in the UFC, man. I mean, right now he's 1-3 in the UFC. He could very well be fighting for his UFC career. He's getting another opportunity, and I'm going to pick him to get the job done. I think he wins this fight. He's the most experienced fighter Martinez has fought to date. And he also knocked out Luke Saunders and fought to split decisions in both of his other UFC fights. So short into the stick in a few fights, bad luck in the O'Malley fight, whatever you want to say, bad fight IQ in that moment, maybe he was rocked, but I think he gets the job done against Jonathan Martinez. Before entering the UFC, Andrei Cirkunov was also fighting higher levels fighter, I believe. He was fighting higher level fighters than Martinez has been fighting lately. So Martinez lost his only fight to his only opponent that doesn't have a close to 500 record. So I'm pretty confident in Andrei Cirkunov to get this win here. With that being said, let's move to the ranked light heavyweights, Patrick Cummins and Misha Cirkunov. Patrick Cummins is 2-2 in his last 4 fights, coming off of a unanimous decision to Corey Anderson, which snapped a 2-fight winning streak that lost to Corey Anderson. They snapped a 2-fight winning streak over Jan Blachowicz and John Volante for Patrick Cummins, and now he's going to be taking on Misha Cirkunov, who's also 2-2 in his last 4 fights. But Misha Cirkunov is currently riding a 2-fight losing streak, suffering 2 first-round knockouts in a row to Volkan Oezdemir and Glover Teixeira. So I'm going to be picking Misha Cirkunov actually to snap that skid. I think he's going to get the win. He's slightly younger, more experienced fighter. He's also fighting in front of his home crowd looking to snap this losing skid. Cirkunov won his first 4 fights in the UFC with impressive wins over Alex Nicholson, Ian Cutelaba, and Nikita Krylov. But he was, came up short in his last 2 fights. But even before the UFC, he was fighting talented fighters. So he's finished 11 of his 13 wins. I think he can come in here and get the job done versus Patrick Cummins. I'm taking Misha Cirkunov. Now we've got the co-main event of the evening, the GOAT, Artem Lobov. He was supposed to be fighting originally Zubaira Tukhugov. It's a guy that was involved in the Khabib Nurmagomedov Conor McGregor brawl, so he got taken out of the fight, and now it's looking like he's going to be replaced by the menace Michael Johnson, which honestly, this is going to be a good fight still, man. Doesn't have all the McGregor Khabib drama, but it's still a fun style matchup. And I think this could potentially be a barn burner. I mean, Artem Lobov is a guy that's definitely willing to stand in there and trade with you, and he's willing. Shit, he does it in practice all day with Conor McGregor, right? He's known for pretty much taking shots in practice. But other than that, Artem Lobov, no respect, man. He takes fights, through injury, through sickness. The fucking Siberian Express rolls on, choo-choo motherfuckers. So Artem Lobov, man, and his epic record, 14-14, definitely one of the GOATs. He had a tough matchup originally. He was taking on Zubaira Tukhugov, who was like 18-4. Now he's taking on Michael Johnson, who's 19-12, coming down to featherweight. And Michael Johnson, man, he's had a little rough patch in the UFC. So with that being said, this is maybe a little bit of a closer fight for Artem. Who knows? But Artem Lobov is currently riding a 2-fight losing streak to Cub Swanson and Andre Fili. Michael Johnson snapped his 3-fight losing streak in his last fight against Andre Fili, actually. So I'm giving the edge to Michael Johnson to win this fight. The only reason Artem Lobov is really in the UFC is because he's Conor McGregor's right-hand man, but he's lost all of his toughest fights in the UFC. Michael Johnson is 2-5 in his last 7 fights, but he's only lost to some of the best lightweights in the world, and now he's moved down to featherweight. Michael Johnson has wins over Joe Lozon, Gleison Tibau, Edson Barboza, Dustin Poirier, and Andre Fili. And he's fought Beneil Dariush, Nate Diaz, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Justin Gaethje, and Darren Elkins. That's a crazy resume for someone to lose to Artem Lobov, who's got a 500 record. And the best win on his resume so far was Teruto Ishihara. So, with that being said, I'm pretty confident in Michael Johnson to win this fight, even on short notice. Although that weight cut to 145 on short notice is a little concerning. So, we'll see how he looks off of that. Moving on to the main event. This is a hard fight for me to call, man. Very, very fucking close fight right here. Holy shit. Volkan Oezdemir knocked out Misha Cirkunov and Jimmy Manuwa after earning a split decision over Ovince St. Preux in his UFC debut, which earned him a title shot. He ended up ultimately losing to Daniel Cormier in the second round via KO/TKO. But he's taking on Anthony Smith in this fight. Anthony Smith is 5-1 in his last 6 fights and 2-0 since moving up to light heavyweight with a first-round knockout over Rashad Evans and Shogun earlier this year. This will actually be Anthony Smith's 4th fight this year. I'm giving the edge to Volkan Oezdemir, although it is just slight, man. This is a super close fight, hard to call. I'm not super confident because Anthony Smith is more experienced, and he's also looked great at 205 since moving up from 185. I think Oezdemir will be one of Smith's toughest fights of his career, and he's also known for knocking out guys. And Anthony Smith has been knocked out by Thiago Santos in his last couple of fights, and one of them. So, I mean, that's scary for Smith. But with that being said, Oezdemir was not fighting super high-level competition before signing with the UFC. Now, his UFC wins are very impressive. He beat Ovince St. Preux on short notice. That was very impressive. And he also knocked out Misha Cirkunov, and he also knocked out he also knocked out Jimmy Manawa to earn the title shot. So he's knocked out some good strikers. He's got a good Muay Thai background, or he's got a good background in striking, and he's been becoming more well-rounded as he's, you know, been a professional fighter. But this is a close fight. Smith, it might be a little bit smaller. He's going to be taller, but I'm just saying he used to fight at 185. He's coming up from, you know, he's fought now twice at 205. But with that being said, Oezdemir's not, he's a natural light heavyweight. So there's that going into this fight. Oezdemir has looked great in his UFC fights, but I actually think Anthony Smith might have a little better cardio. But that could have just been how Oezdemir looked in his fight against OSP. He looked like he slowed down a little bit. And other than that, he usually doesn't go out of the first round to really see where his cardio's at. That's why his nickname is No Time. He's knocking motherfuckers out in no time. But once his cardio gets tested, you got to wonder where it's going to be. Is he going to slow down? Is he good? I mean, he's fought, you know, a few fights outside the UFC, but honestly, if you look at the opponents, they weren't UFC caliber. So that's why this fight's harder to call than you might think, you know. So Anthony Smith could very well come in here and win this fight and make his case for being a top 5 light heavyweight in the world. But I'm giving the edge to Volkan Oezdemir, guys. So with that being said, man, it is what it is. I'm curious to know what you guys' predictions are. Let me know, who do you have in the main event, Oezdemir or Smith? And let me know what your predictions are for the entire UFC Moncton main card in the comments. So with that being said, Ben, it is what it is. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.